Is anyone feeling a little inspired by what you've been hearing this weekend? Good. Anyone feel like you want to go and start planting some churches? Wayne, I need you just to take notice of these hands. There's several hands going up. So who wants? Yeah, he wants to plant a church. There's a whole crew down here who want to plant churches. I'm really excited. Excited's not the right word. I'm delighted is the right word. I'm delighted that so many of you are feeling the nudge from God to go plant churches. So this afternoon, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to hear from Danuta, and then in the Q&A time with her husband as well. They've been involved with a church plant, right, like we were in Dubbo earlier, right? So if you could just imagine where Dubbo is and then just drive as fast as your game for an hour or two west of that, you'll be getting close. Like I went from Walgett to where they lived, which was in Burke. And Burke actually has the place where there's a sign which says beyond the black stump is just right there. So, you can drive out of town and there's the black stump and there's the sign. And beyond that, there's really nothing for hundreds of miles. But in the most unlikeliest of ways, they were working in Burke and then something else started somewhere else. And I'll let them tell the story. It is a fabulous story. It's a story of what God wants to do and being willing to go where God wants you to be to ride the waves that he creates. So ever so grateful. Now, this is part of the story they won't tell you. If you're working in country areas, you need to go to your local conference and say, we need a bull bar on the front, because to be able to drive home at night back to where you live, it's just kangaroo country. And if you're driving that in the middle of a drought, the only bit of green grass is beside the road, if there's any at all, which means that's where all the kangaroos were. And what would be normally an hour trip from Burke to Brewarrina could become like an hour and a half kind of trip at night, because all the mob are on the road and you're just dodging roos and you're dodging dead roos. And sometimes you don't dodge them at all and you just keep driving anyway. In fact, one night I spoke to a truckie and said, what was your worst night driving on the Australian roads? And he says, it was one night driving through the Pilliga. And I said, so what was that like? And he said, well, I was doing about 100 with the truck, and then there was a whole mob of kangaroos on the road. And I said, so what happened? And he said, well, I just kept driving. And then eventually the truck broke down because they all got tangled up in the wheels. And I'm thinking, what sort of an idiot are you? You just didn't think to slow down. But that's kind of outback. Right, so it really is in many ways a wild west, and working there is lonely, it's taxing, it's all of that, but it was unbelievably rewarding. Would you put your hands together and welcome Danuta Stockwell?
Well, it's a pleasure to come and be able to share with you this afternoon. Some of you, I recognise faces. Keith and I have recognised some of your faces from when we do lectures in classes. There'll be a very small portion that you may recognise, but hopefully through the story of the church plant, you'll learn a lot more. I know we do the class on sharing Jesus with our Indigenous peoples, so there's a very small, tiny bit from that as well. But our insights from our Indigenous church plant, let me just add before I go to the first slide, I want to bounce off what Neil actually said. So yes, it would take an hour and a half. And I remember when we took our church folk from this church plant to the first big camp, it took us not 10 hours from Burke to big camp. It took us 16 hours. Because we left at 4:30 in the morning, took an hour and a half to get to Bree through the kangaroo-infested country. We picked up the people, but then there were lots of stops along the way, because when one Aboriginal person got off, the others wanted to get off, especially the young children. So, yeah, long trips sometimes. Okay. We received a call in 2011, quite an unexpected call by Pastor John Lang, who was the president of this conference at the time in 2011. At the time, we were living in Sydney, and at the time, we were in Mount Druitt Church, and excitedly there was about 30 people that were coming along from our contacts to the church. And at the time, we received the call and we prayed about it to go to Burke, out back of Burke. So we moved from this to this. Okay, I've just turned it on mine. Okay, I'm needing to go along with my words. Don't worry, I'll get onto it. To this. And you can see this is actually the town of Brewarrina, just outside of that plain. As you can see, I took this photo actually 4 weeks ago as well. And you can see even at this time of the year, it's quite dry. Brewarrina is actually an hour to the east from Burke. So if you look up on the map, there is Dubbo that Neil was just talking about. Up here is Burke. Up here is Brewarrina. Then there's Walgett, and there's a few other surrounding towns around there. So we even started visiting to Ngoni, which is an hour north of Burke, and we had a little church plant going there for just over a year as well. But the one in Brewarrina took off more, and we put our focus on there. We believe that God took us to Burke and he opened the doors in Brewarrina. The thing is, when we went to Burke, the church had been closed for 20 years, and so we were starting from scratch. It was sheer hard work to find our very first person that would be interested in having Bible studies. So what did we do? We call it God's project because it was a divine appointment on the streets of Brewarrina 3 months after we moved to Burke, with this gentleman next to Keith. At the time, I was coming out of the police station, not because I'd done anything wrong, but to let them know that we were doing some door knocking in the area, and in case anyone complained. And it was outside the police station, not knowing that Uncle Les, this is his name, that he actually was the ALO, Aboriginal Liaison Officer, for the police station there. It was a divine appointment, and a short conversation led to him saying that he believes in God. And when I said that to him, he said, I believe Jesus is coming soon. And from that, the thing is that I said to him, you need to meet my husband. Keith wasn't with me at that time when I had just come out of the police station. I got his name, but I didn't want to initiate about his address. I thought because it's a small community, we would find out where he lived, and we did. It took a few months to find out, not only find out where he lived, but to actually find them at home. And so we started visiting, and here is the photo of Uncle Les and Auntie. Done it again. Photo of Uncle Les and Auntie Joyce. Uncle Les hadn't been to church for 8 years. Auntie Joyce had actually been raised on the mission outside of Brewarrina as a child, and so she remembered the old-time hymns. They meant a lot to her. And as we started to visit, Uncle Les was mostly not at home and she was at home. Long story short, in this segment, the thing is that we visited for just over a year regularly. And what we would do is listen to her stories. And I'm going to touch that on that a little bit later, on what did we learn through that time. Keith would always take his guitar in the car. And so there came a point as we would look for opportunities to share about Jesus, the doors opened more and more. And one night, Uncle Les was there. This was already our second year there. And it was already late at night. We listened and shared with them as we visited, and then we sang a few songs. Keith played the guitar. And at that point, Uncle Les leant forward to Keith and he said, I want you to baptize me. So even though these folk had an interest in God, it took over a year before it would come to the point of them being interested in something more. The thing is, with Aboriginal people, you need to be sensitive and gentle. And actually the key with them is trust. But not only that, it's about taking the journey very, very gently with them. And at this point, Keith then responded and said, we spoke about Bible studies. And so we started Bible studies with them. And you can see here they've got the Adventist hymnal. So we started then doing some singing with them as well when we would do Bible studies. So Bible studies started on Wednesday night. And even before we got to the study on Sabbath, because in our minds our vision was that we wanted to plant a church, we actually asked if they would like to have Bible studies then on Saturday, because Uncle Les just couldn't get enough in the one night as well. So we started doing that on Sabbath. And so we started a small home group, home church. And you can see this is on a Sabbath that we're actually meeting together. There was a small group of us together doing that. Yeah. And so what happened is that we would meet in the home, and then at the end of the year, praise God, were the first 2 baptisms ever in Brewarrina, Adventist baptisms. That was all God leading. That's why we call it God's project. And Keith invited Pastor John Lang to come as well, because 20 years earlier he'd been at Burke. And basically what had happened is that Keith said, will you come along with me and we'll give you and asked him to baptise because of his background and the fact that he was a retired conference president as well. It was a really special day. The day after, the week after that, we actually started church. And God blessed with 47 people on that first day. Most of them were children. So most of the time through our church plant, about 75% were children. About 95% were non-Adventists. So this was a challenge for us, but it was also a really beautiful thing. And so these are some of our very early days. You can see on the left-hand side how long that was. We had 30 children that particular day. And that particular day was already once Adventist Aviation had come on board and started flying over with a team to us. We needed help. It was only 2 of us initially starting out. Currawa School was open. Some of the staff started coming over occasionally with the students. But we needed help, and so Alicia, the one with the blonde hair, would actually coordinate the team and fly over once a month. Here is the adult group in the early days as well. You also see Pastor Paul Rankin on the right-hand side there. He would come sometimes. And what we'd actually do is Sabbath morning would start off at 7:30, packing the car in Burke for an 8 o'clock leave to arrive in Bree at 9 o'clock, to unpack the car and set up the hall, to then go and pick up people, to then come back to provide breakfast for the children and the adults and anyone else and the teens that were coming, to then do church, to then give lunch, take them back, come back, clean up, debrief with the small team that we had and drive home to Burke. It was a full-on day, but it was exciting. Our debrief on the way home was all the things that we would notice of how God was working. This particular day, there was just a small group of the young children here, but on the left of Uncle Les is Auntie Mary, and she came on board to help us a lot as well at the start. So this was once we actually purchased a bus through the help from the conference as well. This is another day where some of the children actually were being taken home after we'd done some activities as well. You can probably guess that was about Daniel in the Lion's Den. This one here, Uncle Sid and Auntie Rongo are still faithful people there in Brewarrina, and they were our big major helpers with things. And this was our first year anniversary of the church. And then we actually have some of the flights when they came in, Adventist Aviation team when they'd fly in. And here's another day when the Adventist Aviation flew in as well. We also had Stormco coming each year. And what we did is we didn't know that they were actually coming. They didn't know we had started a church plant. So the following year, which was our first year already of having the church plant. We asked them to come on the Sabbath so they would take the program and connect with the children and then actually continue on through the week. Here we also ran some chip programs, 2 different chip programs. That's the certificates there. And this was one of another baptism. This man here, Keith, would walk the race course for almost 3 years because this man was illiterate. He could not actually read. And so Keith took him under his arms. And whenever we got to Bree, I knew that Keith would be somewhere with Mark because he was just taking him everywhere and discipling him. The exciting thing was, of course, Mark was baptised, and still today he is part of the Bree church today. And as our church grew, so even though it would waver in numbers at times, on average it was probably between, most times, around 30 to 35 people attending. So what are some of the insights and lessons that can be learned? The key and most important thing for us was a strong dependence on God. We would pray, pray, and pray. Like I say, for the first few months, before we even found our first contact, somebody that would be interested in something more, took quite a while, and it took almost 2 years before we had the first baptisms. We'd pray hard. In fact, when we started the church plant and things started getting pretty rough at times, and you've probably heard this at times about church planting, but sometimes the strong traditional Adventists come along and they go, "You aren't doing church the right way." And so we had some of those problems, but there were other issues as well. Spiritualism and things like that are very big in the Indigenous communities. So we had to pray a lot in the homes as well. And so we started up a war room in the home. And we really saw God perform amazing miracles. We would listen to God's voice. So our very first Sabbath where we started church, unfortunately for us, all that we knew is we went by a fairly traditional way of doing church. And we got in the car, and the whole hour back home to Bourke, we literally ripped ourselves apart in the sense that we just went, this is not going to work. We don't know how to do it, but it was not practical enough. It was too information-based. It was not relevant for the culture and context that we were dealing with. And that is really crucial. And there's a point, I've got that, you can see in point number 3, to be culturally and contextually sensitive. And so we prayed hard that week. And we felt that God really clearly, by the end of the week, told us that we needed to flip church on its head, to not do Sabbath school first and then church, but they would start with church, and that we would do it in a very short, simple format and not too structured. There would be a short sermonette, but there would be music as well. And then we would move straight into Bible study time. So there was no break. And we started with just an adult group and mainly children. But over time, what happened, and that structure is still being kept till today in Brewarrina, the thing is that what actually happened is that we, as we actually did that, God truly blessed, because we were then, it would take almost a year before we could actually show the children Bibles, and we would teach them then to read from the Bibles as well. And you'll see some of those pictures of how we did that. Be very patient and don't give up. We kept our vision in mind. Our vision was to have a church plant out at Brewarrina. Our vision was to then also, once that was established, to then really try and get things going in Bourke. And by that time we were then moving, but things were starting to pick up in Bourke as well. Be culturally and contextually sensitive. So in this case, Brewarrina has only got a population of 1,500 people. So it's really small. The Adventist church became the most functioning church in Brewarrina. It was the place to be for those that were there. And people, yes, I'll tell you this, I've got to say this, because you experienced this too, I think, Neil. But yes, we would get the goats in, we would get the dogs in, we would have the kids coming in, with their Coke and their hot chips and things initially. And kid you not, the kids would be climbing up the bars. They were like little monkeys, having fun. And at times we were just like, how are we going to do this? But we just saw God at work changing lives, and not just children's lives, but then the teenagers' lives and the adults' lives in a massive way. So being culturally and contextually sensitive means to apply 3 important areas: to listen, live, and learn. What do I mean by that? Listening with our Indigenous people, with our First Nations people, the stories of their country, their nation, and especially from the elders. Listen to their stories of pain, heartache, suffering, past and present, regarding racism, impact of colonisation, impacts on health, and other things, and it brings reconciliation and healing. Stories about their families, past and present. For our Indigenous people, family is everything. So even though initially we were having a lot of children, it meant so much to the parents that then the parents started coming along. But not only that, the schools were saying how much better behaved the children were, and then the transfer that this was doing within the home environment and bringing families together. Stories of their lifestyles, listen to those as well. Live and learn. Build trusting relationships. Because of the intergenerational trauma that our Indigenous people have, trust is the biggest thing. If you got their trust, you are in. You are in. And be genuine, though. They can tell whether you're genuine or not as well. But trusting relationships. And they'll start calling you sis and bro, even if you're not part of the Aboriginal culture. And when they call you that, you know you're in. You're in as part of their family and part of their community. Quality time, be with them and show respect for their culture and beliefs at all times. God works within culture. He works with culture. And so that's really important that we can do that. What else did we learn? We learned very quickly that the casual meetings in the streets were a great way to connect, because they'd be walking the streets and we would need to stop with them and talk to them. If you didn't, it was classified as disrespectful. And so you would have to we would give them the time, and we would have people talking, not in the car, but in the streets and in the shops with us as well. Introductions by family members. The other key thing with our Indigenous people is networking. Once you've actually met 1 or 2 families or 1 or 2 people, the beautiful thing is that it's through networking that you then get further contacts for Bible studies and inviting people to church and to church picnics and a range of things that we would do. Attend local events. Initially, when we didn't know anyone much and we were trying to find that very first soul that we would have Bible studies with. And of course, that early stage was building friendships, which we're all familiar with. We'd also attend local events, the sports events, funerals, NAIDOC events, anywhere just to be in amongst the people to find ways to connect with them. We'd even sit around campfires with them. And then we would meet their needs through clothing, food, household needs, and also work at helping to build their self-esteem and self-worth. Our Adventist church offers so much for our Indigenous people in the way of self-worth and self-esteem. The 4th thing, visit, visit, visit. We know visitations are important, but with our First Nations people, visitations are the key. So trust is the key, networking and visitations. Visit, 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 because that's where the bonds are deepened even more. And then network, network, network. When it comes to the Bible studies and church, this is what we learnt, that we had to be prepared, but the very key word that we learnt very quickly, and we would laugh about this in the car, is flexibility. You've got to be flexible. Honestly, things would just change in the moment. Sometimes people will rock up late, and so church would start a little bit later. We would have to go with the flow. We wouldn't have to go, okay, this is the time to start. We should be starting. I remember one key time where I had to be really flexible. Keith was away at Mamarafa College at the time. Adventist Aviation was flying in. And just as I was about to leave Burke, I received a phone call that from one of the teams saying, it's too foggy, we can't go further, we've landed the plane in Scone, we won't be able to make it. I had to plan a sermon on the way as I was driving to Bree. And everyone chipped in and took part, as I guess, when I arrived there. The event, rather than time with our First Nations people, is the key, which is why the flexibility has to come in, because time doesn't matter so much. It's about being together. We had to use practical and visual means to share the Bible. And also in the church, in church, it was about using PowerPoints, many stories to illustrate, doing object lessons and drawings. Be aware of the educational levels. In other words, we had to look at the literacy and their numeracy levels of how they were with that, the problems they might have, and then supplement it with other resources. So we actually purchased God pods. So Mark, who I showed you earlier, was one of them who used the God. Are you familiar with God pods? Okay. So Fiji and the islands, they've got little... They're about so big, aren't they? They hang off the neck like a walkie-talkie almost, but it's got the whole Bible on there. And basically by it's charged up by it being out in the sunlight. So it's solar. So Mark would walk around town with his God pod all the time and rock up to church with his God pod. It was beautiful. And he would walk around listening to it, and people would ask him what it was. Teach how to find the books of the Bible verses and things like that. The last two key ones are belonging and community are more important than commitment. So we're finding people came to church before they were interested in having Bible studies. We had been used to the fact that most of the time people will have Bible studies, then come to church. With our First Nations people, it's the other way around, because community and a sense of belonging matters. And the eighth one, which is crucial and so highly important, it was disciple, disciple, disciple. We discipled all age groups early, and with our gradual stepping stones. So here you can see the sense of community. And let me show you some of what, as I wrap up, about discipleship. On the left here, we see Auntie Mary with her daughter, Doreen. So Auntie Mary we discipled fairly early, and then as Doreen came along, we discipled her as well. So at this stage, this was about a year and a half into our church plant, where things were a little bit more structured by then. By then, you can also see towards the back, I don't know, you can see towards the top, there's another group. That was the junior group by then. By then, we also had a teen class. So we actually had the younger group, the juniors, the teens, and the adult group. And God was really blessing. You can see here Doreen in the cream jumper was teaching children how to pray as well as how to read the Bible. These are some more photos of the young children. That's the junior class. And then here is one of the church services that we actually had as well. In fact, I think that was the day that Mark was baptized as well. And so here just last year, end of last year in December last year, was the 10th anniversary of the Brewarrina church plant. You didn't have that photo? Oh. Oh, they were hidden slides. Okay, keep going. It's probably after that. Yep, there it is. Okay, and sorry, I needed my computer to be able to read some of the things. My eyesight wouldn't go up there. So on the left, you see Doreen. Doreen, for the last 4 years, has been the pastor, or leading the church there, ministering as well as studying some of the time at Mamarafa College. And it was the 10th anniversary. And if we flick the next one over, please. Neil, yep, that was the church plant there as well. That was actually, you may have seen it in the record. I want to finish off with this quote from Cole Potter Ministry, and then we've got the very short video that Andrew will just show that goes for 3 minutes. Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Saviour mingled with people as one who desired their good. He showed sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Then he invited them, follow me. I believe that's the method that we followed, and God really blessed. And we praise God for his leading, and we give him all of the glory. Thanks, Andrew. It's just the 3-minute video.
How cool was that? Danuta, you got to get back up here. Grab Keith. My first question for you is, who's the pastor out there now? And maybe Keith. Yeah, we'll get his voice up here. Come on, both of you up. And Andrew, we can stop sharing the screen as well. Is it on? Get that one on.
Wasn't expecting to get up today. I was actually enjoying my wife presenting. But what was the question?
Yeah, who's the pastor out there now?
Doreen Waits, the lady that was up on the screen.
Yeah. Oh. And so who was Doreen? She was the daughter of...
She was Sister Mary's daughter, the lovely little lady there.
Yeah. So one of your very first contacts in Bree is now the pastor. Her daughter is now the pastor out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well,
yeah, go on.
She's just taken a break from ministry just 2 weeks ago. But yes, so for the last since COVID, she's been the pastor out there, the daughter, and yeah, we discipled her along the way.
Does anyone have any questions for Keith and Danuta?
Bit worried about this one.
You want one of ours? You want one of ours?
No, that's all good. I'm good. I can fix that voice. No, I can't get mine. Okay. Yeah. We'll grab one of those. That's what we'll do. All right, there we go.
All right. Yay. Okay. I really loved the presentation, first of all, and it's awesome to see how you navigated a very different way of seeing things. Like, certainly in my context, I'm used to the sort of rural, I guess, context, but it's very different to the Indigenous context. And I like what you were saying about navigating like the cultural differences and how that needs to be respected and affirmed. I guess where I'm curious is, how do you navigate those tricky topics where Christianity clashes a little bit? Like the one that comes to mind is the Indigenous emphasis on the ancestors and the spirits of the ancestors and all that sort of stuff. That's often very significant in Indigenous culture, and yet in Adventist thinking, you know, we've got state of the dead, and we would have a bit of a clash there. How do you respect the culture and affirm that while also kind of navigating those difficult questions?
First thing that we done with the Aboriginal people is we built friendship. So God, not that we let God go, but we had to put God aside a little bit, just a little bit. We'd have our devotions and that. But the thing is, with the old concept of Biami, rainbow serpent and all that, people come up, being an Aboriginal person, some people get offended with me. They say, why do you worship this God that is the whitefellas thing? And it's a big, I don't want to go into that because it's a big debate. But the thing is that what I found is, I just say, look, I respect the rainbow serpent, I respect culture, because I am still an Aboriginal person that has culture. My roots go back a long way in my community. So for me, it's respecting what they believe. I believe in God strongly, and there's no way. I used to be a Biami believer years ago. I used to do the marches and all that for land rights and all that. So I know what it's all about. But I grew up in the Adventist church with mum and my sisters and grandmother. So it's about respect. So firstly, if they believe Biami, don't even worry about God. You still follow God, but just put him on the side for a little bit. Just get to know them, because what they do is that the way that you are towards people, the way that you build your rapport with people, before too long, they'll be saying, what church are you? So then you can start sharing little bits about your church. With Auntie Joyce and that, we were fortunate with Auntie Joyce and that, because they had that belief in them already. Auntie Joyce grew up in the mission stations with Christians around. So they had it there. Some of our younger generation today now, they are so out of control. that's where it's challenging. So yeah, just build the friendship. I was talking to one of those young blokes here about mission work out in the West, and that's where it starts, is building friendship, and then let the Holy Spirit work the rest, and it'll happen. And you can add.
And just to add, I guess we were fortunate that where we were, there's a number of churches there already before the Adventist Church, and that they had been missions before that as well. So people have some kind of concept or understanding through the generations about God. And essentially, most of the time, we weren't coming across any of those problems.
Any other questions? Yeah. The one in the pocket's now working. There we go.
So, so when you went in there and you were going door to door, what did you say to people? Did you say, we're here to try to start a church, or we're here to, you know, what was it that you actually used to introduce yourself?
You don't really have to say anything. Honestly, you don't. No, I'm being serious. You don't. I'll tell you a story about me a couple of weeks ago. But anyhow, all you need is a bit of literature in your hands. Good News magazine, they are so handy. Has anyone ever seen the Good News magazines done through ATSIM Ministries? Yes, my brother. Anyone else? Well, these magazines are designed for Aboriginal people. They are chock-a-block full of pictures of Aboriginal people all over Australia. So I remember out at Brewarrina when we started the church plant, an old fella come up to me and he was talking. And he said, you give me this magazine the other day. I said, yeah, the magazine, Unc, yeah. And he said, see this person here, that's my mob. I said, oh yeah, where do they live? So they live over in, where is it, South Australia?
Western Australia.
No, Port Augusta or whatever it is. Is it Port Augusta? Port Augusta, he said, they live over in Port Augusta. So he's seen his mob from over there. So that built connection with us. So he started talking more with us about God and things like that. I think the old fella died before we can do anything really with him. But again, it is a great tool to break the ice with Aboriginal people, because you know the magazine, you open it up and you say, he's full of pictures, you know, and I normally, being Aboriginal, I call them aunt, uncle. So they sort of get the gist.
The other thing, Cynthia, is that right? Yeah. The thing is that when we moved there initially, I wasn't picked up, but it was Keith that was picked up, and I was still doing a little bit of literature work. So the door knocking with what I had was what I used a little bit, but we didn't actually do much door knocking because we wanted to be seen as salespeople in a small community when we wanted to start at a church. So we used the Good News, but also typically it is also you drop names with Aboriginal people. So do you know the Smiths? Do you know who were some of the other ones that were out there? But in Keith's case, because he's Aboriginal, there's an immediate connection and talking that happens that I would just step back and watch with awe. Yeah, he was one of them. Yeah. And so, you know, that was an advantage. But with me being with him, immediately they embraced me as a sister as well. So, yeah, each conversation was slightly different, but essentially, you know, towards building relationships. So we didn't do a massive amount of door knocking because then it moved quickly into networking.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes.
I've seen a little bit of the communities up in the northern part of Western Australia, and some of the communities seem to have issues with alcoholism. Did you observe any issues in the community you were working in, and how did you navigate individuals or groups or families who struggled with addictions?
Lots. Do you want to? I could talk. We could both talk all day about this. Yeah.
I used to be a drinker back in the day, so yeah. I know where you're coming from, what you're saying. Yeah, look, it's an issue all over Australia. It is Australia-wide. Unfortunately, in the Aboriginal community, it's well publicised, and it happens. Burke was worse than Brewarrina. There was a bit more love in the community in Bree than Burke, so they were very workable. But it is a big issue. The thing is that being a guitar player, we went to a place in Burke and we were doing a visit, and they were sitting around out the front drinking and yarning and laughing and carrying on. I went over Good News magazine. to give a Good News magazine, and got talking. And my wife said, "Oh, Dale, why don't you go and get your guitar and play guitar?" Okay, I'll go and grab it. So I'll play a few gospel songs. And as soon as I pulled my guitar out, I played One Day at a Time, old country song, which was really good. I love that song. And one of the guys was drunk as, and he said, "Uncle," he said, "just give me a sec. I've got to go inside." I thought he wanted me to hold up on the song, and he went inside and he came back out. He said he had a guitar, and an old bashed up guitar, and he sat in and he said, "Now can you play what was that song? Fill My Cup, Lord." And I said, "I sure can." He said, "Well, how about playing it?" So I started playing Fill My Cup, and he started strumming. He was a bit out of key, so I had to tune him up. But he started playing Fill My Cup. He was singing along, and everyone started singing the song, drunk as. But the thing is that we were just there like, praise the Lord, because God can work with drunk people too. And I don't know what happened to these people in the end, but the thing is that they got a taste of God that day. And we don't know what the Spirit of God does. Like we left soon after that. We were sort of...
Yeah, when we kept some contact with them. But I think that's the key. The thing is that because of Keith's background of drinking, taking drugs, smoking, there's an immediate and instant connection with them as well in relating to that. But music was one of those big things that we used a lot because they know the old gospels. They're also sung very much at funerals. So whether people are drunk or not, the same thing is that they have this deep soulful interest because they're a very spiritual culture, and so there's this depth to them even in amongst their drunkenness. And a lot of those who have been transformed and have changed lives become Christians will tell you that it's sometimes in their drunkest state that they've found God. Yeah.
Love that.
Keith, can I just share quickly please. Just something that anyone should not do, and especially me. I was up in Kempsey a few weeks ago doing some visits. I was on my way back home and I went up into Green Hills. You're probably familiar with Green Hills in Kempsey, and I was going to see some people. So I got a phone call and I parked down at this road, and it was sort of like a nowhere road going nowhere, but it was at the corner of two houses. And I parked there and windows were up, had the aircon on, the car still kicked over, talking on the phone for about 20 minutes. And then I decided, better go in and check these people out. So I finished my phone call. And when I pulled up, a lady was over the street. She was calling out, and I wound my window down and I said, "Yeah, what's happened?" She said, "Who are you?" She was ripping into me because she didn't know who I was. I said, "You're my cousin, you're my mob," because they're all my cousins around there. And this lady was right into me. And the thing is that the big mistake I made, I was sitting in my car, nice looking four-wheel drive, beautiful silver four-wheel drive, and she thought I was some sort of government person there trying to take their kids away.
That's right.
So the thing is, if you're going to go and visit people, go there, get out of your car and go and do it, and then go and do your phone call. Don't sit around in their neighbourhood on the phone, because they'll be looking at you and they're looking through the window going...
You're looking very suspect, right? Yeah, that's it.
So I thought I was going to get boomeranged or speared or something.
Oh, wow. You made it out alive that day. Now, Keith, we've got a lot of potential church planners in the room. What would you want? What sort of last thing for them? What seed would you want to plant in their mind and their heart for planting with Indigenous people in Australia?
A few seeds, but the main seed, I suppose, pray. Pray, because don't do it and think that it's an easy thing. I'll go out and I'll do it. Because when we left the work out at Brewarrina, there were so many broken hearts. Even our hearts were broken, because we felt we were there for a while. Neil, you was in our conference at the time, and we felt we were there for a while. But if you're going to do it, pray hard about it, because it's something that you don't want to just tap in and, I'll experience it and, no, I don't, it's not for me. Because when people get to connect with you, especially the kids, they will connect with you. And it doesn't matter. They don't look, little Aboriginal kids don't look up and say, "Oh, Uncle Keith, you're Aboriginal, you're cool." Doesn't matter what colour you are, who you are, what breed you're from. They look up to you with love in their eyes. And it doesn't matter who you are. Neil, you could be out there and they say, "Uncle Neil,"
That's right.
They fall in love with you straight away. So, yeah, pray about it. And you might have something to add to that too, Darla.
Just the fact that I think our First Nations people really need to hear about Jesus. And when their lives are transformed, it's powerful. And it's also can be the fastest area of growth within our church if we do it.
And can I just say, out of all the 23 nations in North New South Wales, with our Indigenous nations, we've got a presence in 2 in 100 years.
We're hopefully getting a third one soon.
Oh, and a third one on the way. I love
no,
that.
Sorry,
It's only taken 120
There's already a
years.
third group that's just started in Port Macquarie.
Love
and
it.
there's hopefully a fourth one that you spoke with somebody
Glad
this
John will
week.
share that.
Hopefully there's a fourth one soon.
Fantastic. So there's a lot of scope to plant a lot of Indigenous churches throughout, just in North New South Wales, yet alone the rest of Australia, where there's more than 600 different tribes, every nation, language, tribe and people.
That's it.
Just very quickly for you, Neil, there is a young fella in Port Macquarie. Sorry, Dale, I've got to be quick. But there's a young fella who got baptised around this time last year, Aboriginal man. He's got a small group going every Thursday night. 40 odd people go to the small group, all Aboriginal people in Port Macquarie.
Wow. Fantastic.
So, yeah,
Exciting.
things are looking good.
It is looking good. Thank you. Please, round of applause. Keith and Danuta.